Hi, everyone, and welcome to Get Hired Live. I am your host, Andrew Seaman. I am the LinkedIn news editor for job seekers and careers. And today we're going to talk about how to find a job in this difficult environment when there's a pandemic, economies are hurting. So welcome, and I hope we offer you some help today. As always, I want to start off by welcoming you and hoping you introduce yourselves in the comments. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us where you're looking for work. Tell us what you're looking for. Maybe you are looking in a specific area of the world or in the country. Put that into the comments. And then also, I want you to keep an eye out on the comments so that way you can network with people who maybe be looking in the same industry as you, in the same region as you, and connect. Some of the greatest comments that I get and some of the greatest messages I get are from people who actually form connections on the broadcast and then they help each other job search. It's actually a really well known and proven way to job search faster and get a new position when you're working together, where you're bouncing ideas off of each other. So keep that in mind and try it out. It might help you in the long run. And as always, we're going to be taking your questions. So also make sure you put your questions into the stream and we'll be answering them with an expert that's coming up. And speaking of our expert, I want to introduce her. Welcome to Elise Gelwicks. She is the founder of LView Consulting. So Elise, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, thank you. And, I wanted to start off by talking a little bit about networking, because you've done a lot of work and a lot of research and writing about networking. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with right now. And why is networking so important?
Gosh, in today's environment where there's a lot of people who are unemployed, looking for work, there's more job applicants than ever applying for jobs. And so the best way you can get noticed and get your foot in the door is through someone at that company advocating for you, putting your resume at the top of the pile. And you do that through networking, through building meaningful professional relationships. And I also think it's important to get clarity on the definition of networking. So many people picture it as walking into a big event or room and shaking hands, exchanging business cards, and then heading right out. Instead, it's quite the opposite. It's building long-term, mutually beneficial relationships that you keep active through regular communication. So happy to talk a little bit more about how do you stay in touch with these people you're meeting, and then how do you meet them in the first place?
Definitely. And I think, when I was younger, I always thought networking was that, where you walked into a conference room, everyone was super awkward, very uncomfortable in a lot of suits and sort of stuffy dresses, and you exchange business cards and then you get out of there. But it's so much more than that. And, hopefully people take the opportunity to do that now. We have so many people joining us in the stream. We have Robert from New Jersey, Victoria from Virginia, Amelia from Mexico, Deborah from Canada, Timothy from California, and Isabel from Miami. So welcome all of you to the stream and everyone else who's out there. And for all of them joining us, how do you think people can network now, especially when you can't be in the same room together, that you can't go necessarily to networking events in person? How can you actually network during this difficult time?
In fact, it's actually easier in this difficult time because people are more available. We're not going on summer vacations. We're not traveling for work. We have fewer meetings. So there's this increase in capacity to support other people. And there's a stronger desire than ever to help those who have been impacted by COVID, who are struggling. So I think when you put yourself out there, you're going to be blown away by how willing people are to help you, because we have this global feeling of we're all in this together. We want to lift everyone up with us. So the good news is, if you're in this live event or you're watching this later, you are proactive. You take initiative and you are dedicated to finding that dream job. And so you are going to rise to the top here because you are already taking those steps to figure out, how can I build these relationships? And really, it's as simple as finding people on LinkedIn and sending them a message and asking for 15 minutes of their time. So everyone has 15 minutes to help someone else. It's a small ask that you're making, and reaching out and saying, I want to learn about you. I want to hear about your career. I see that you work at Pepsi, and I'm interested in Pepsi. I'd love to hear more about what it's like to be a part of that company culture team. everyone loves to talk about themselves. So they're going to feel flattered and they're going to want to talk about themselves. So know that when you are approaching networking, it should be from the perspective of, I want to learn about you. I want to learn about the company, not I want a job. Can you help me get there? Right. That's whoa, that's way too much to ask. And I don't know you. I can't do that. But a 15-minute phone call to talk about myself, sure, go for it. I'll be happy to do that.
I think that's great advice. Yeah. And I think, whenever I hear people talking about, can I get a job? A lot of people call it going for the jugular, because it's immediate, like, no, get away from me. This isn't a genuine interaction. So I think that's great advice. And in fact, I saw in the stream, Carol was asking, how do you network during this time? So hopefully that helped Carol out there. And one question that came in beforehand was from Rachel, and she talked about career pivoting. And so many people are looking to do it right now. In fact, my colleague George Andrews just did a story about a lot of the career pivots that have happened recently. And one of the questions she had was basically, how do you network to pivot into a new field where maybe you don't have contacts, you don't have that existing foundation? And what would your suggestion be for her?
My suggestion, Rachel, and to anyone else thinking through this, this next stage of your career, is to think of every single person you know as a resource. So let's just go through a hypothetical of, I currently work for an ad agency and I want to go into finance at a consumer products company. Okay, so very different fields. I don't know anyone in consumer products. I don't know anyone in finance. So then I think about, okay, who do I know professionally or personally? So let's say it's my neighbor. It's the person who lives down the hall in my apartment building. It's maybe even a religious leader. Think about your priests or rabbis, how many thousands of people they know, and to talk to those people and tell them what you're looking for and ask them, do they know anyone who works in consumer products, who works in finance? Then you get a conversation with them. And let's say you get connected to someone in marketing at this consumer products company. Well, they know someone in the finance department. So this is really where the web of connections comes in. If you think of every single person you know as a resource and you tap into them, then you get access to their networks. And it's this exponential growth that you're going to see. I call these informational interviews, those 15-minute conversations I mentioned a few minutes ago, where you're learning about their career, you're asking them questions. And I should say, you have to be really prepared for these types of conversations. You need to have done your research on the company, the person, stalked their LinkedIn, and make a great impression. And then here's the key. At the end of these conversations, you say, this has been so helpful to get your insight. I'm more excited than ever about an opportunity to contribute to this organization, or you've reconfirmed my interest in finance. Can you think of anyone who might have a good perspective for me, knowing that I'm interested in XYZ? Or if you are talking to a person who works at that company that you actually have your heart set on, you might say, wow, I am so excited about working for this organization. You've really given me some great insight. How would you recommend I best set myself up for a position within the organization? And hopefully they say, well, send me a resume and I'm going to walk it over to HR, or I'll refer you. This is what networking is. And it's going to pay off. It takes a lot of time. It's not always easy, but I promise you that it pays off if you keep at it.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic advice. And also, if people are scared about it, I think what they should know is that a lot of times the way I do my job here is I just reach out to people on LinkedIn. I just send them a cold email and say, hey, listen, I've been following you. I love what you're doing. Can we have a quick chat? So, people respond. And especially when you're making it about them, you want to learn about them. You want to learn about their goals, what they do day to day. And people respond to that. And then, that's how we sort of, communicate. I just sort of say, hey, would you like to come on the show? And, speaking of us, for anyone who's just joining us, I'm Andrew Seaman, LinkedIn newsletter for job seekers and careers. And I'm joined by Elise Gelwicks, who's the founder of LVU Consulting. So be sure you're getting your job search questions into the stream, and we'll be taking them. And I want to move to a question now from Santiago and Lisa. And their questions are basically similar. How do you stand out in this environment when there are so many people job searching and looking for jobs? I think that's something that a lot of people are wondering.
Yeah, so truly, it all comes back to building relationships. So ideally, you would have someone at the company who you've reached out to and have said, hey, I'm really interested in your organization. Do you have a few minutes to connect so I can learn more? And then that person can be an advocate for you internally after you've submitted your application. Another way to do this is after you apply online, let's say you really don't know anyone at that company and you don't know anyone who could introduce you, send an email to the recruiter. And say, I just applied for the role. I'm really looking forward to learning more about this opportunity. What caught my eye, or what I think is most interesting about this opportunity, or my direct experience that relates to it, is blah, blah, blah. So send them a personalized email, and ask, you can even ask them if they have 10 minutes to hop on a call so you can learn more. This is building that relationship with the recruiter, with the company, so that you do stand out. And I'm sure a question is going to be, how do I know who the recruiter is, or how do I know their email? LinkedIn, Google search it, anything like that. Type in recruiter for LofU Consulting if you are applying to my firm, and likely on LinkedIn, the names are going to pop up. You can very easily guess people's email addresses. I do this 10 times a day. If you go to their website and look at what the website is, so it's lovuconsulting.com for my firm, that's the suffix of the email. So it's name@lovuconsulting.com. You might try elise.gelwicks, see if that goes through, egelwicks@lovuconsulting.com, and play around with it until that email gets through to them.
Yeah. And I think, as someone who has a master's degree in investigative journalism, that's pretty much what I did. So that's what my master's degree is. And I think you just gave us a master class in doing that. So you just saved people a lot of money, trust me. And, thinking about sort of also, the whole job search process, we have people who are talking about, how do you apply? How do you narrow down employers? So Stephanie wants to know, what are some ways to narrow down which jobs to apply to? And I think that's something a lot of people struggle with, because they may not have a target company, but they know what kind of job they want. So how can a person say, okay, these are the ones I want to focus on. I don't want to focus on these. What's your suggestion for Stephanie?
Yeah, Stephanie, I would say you need to get really clear on what your priorities are. So is it, I have to live in Chicago, I have to live in New York, or I really could go anywhere in the world, I'm fine with it. Okay, so maybe that's your priority, is location. Maybe a priority is work-life balance. If you know that you want to go into finance, but you don't want to work long hours or 80 hours a week, skip the investment banking companies and go to more in-house finance roles. So get clear on your priorities. Do you care about the work that the company does? Is finding a job that has meaning to you, is that important to you? Or do you not really care? You would be fine working for a company that you might not even align with their values. There's no right or wrong answer. So I would really just write down on a piece of pen and paper all of the different factors that you're considering, rank them out, and then look for companies that meet those, say, top 3 criteria, and go from there.
Yes. And I think, and also it's one of those things too, where it is still important to look at the companies you're applying to too. So do those advanced Google searches, look them up on LinkedIn, look them up anywhere to say, oh, this is a good environment. And that also, I think, is one of the things to help narrow down that search, sort of stock the company almost.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, we had actually a follow-up to the, searching for emails and things like that from Noemi. Basically, she wanted to know, if you have someone who doesn't have their email on the profile on the internet, but you guess it, doesn't that seem pushy to sort of send an email? As a journalist, I say no. Yeah.
No, you know what? You have to put yourself out there. You are going to be successful if you feel a little bit uncomfortable. That's when you know you're doing something right. You're pushing the limits because you're doing what other people aren't. And if the question is, how do I stand out? It's by doing these things that other people aren't doing. And if they find it pushy, they're not going to respond. It's not the end of the world. It's not like you're disqualified from getting the job. So give it a try. Try it out a couple times. See if it's working. See if you're comfortable with it. If it doesn't feel right to you, skip it. Go a different route. Maybe send them a LinkedIn message. It's all about finding what's working, what's not. And then, of course, I want to just reiterate the the fact that it's a numbers game. So every single person you reach out to is not going to reply to you. That's okay. Do it enough times and you're going to see some responses coming back, and it's going to be worthwhile.
Yes. And, I think also, especially if it's a recruiter, one thing that I would sort of have the bias of, these people are the first contact people are supposed to have with the company if you're a job seeker. So, you're supposed to be reaching out to them. So if they feel that you're being pushy, maybe being a recruiter isn't for them. So, because that is literally they're the handshake that gets people into the door for them. And actually, on that theme, Cecilia has a question, which is, are spontaneous applications by email worthwhile? And I think, probably what that is sort of, maybe there isn't a job advertised, but you want to get in front of a company. Is it worthwhile to send maybe your materials over? Is that too pushy? What's your thought on that?
I don't know that that's going to be a good use of your time. What I would recommend instead is building relationships rather than pushing your resume, because if you build a rapport with someone at that company and they like you and they find you impressive, then they're going to think about, how can I bring this person into my company, because I'm dying to work with them and they're amazing. So I would go the route of, I want to learn about you. I want to learn about the company. I'm so interested in what you do or passionate about what you offer. And do that, and then use that conversation to uncover if there are any opportunities. And if not, stay in touch, because there will be opportunities in the future. So you're playing the long game here.
Yes. And, we have a question here too, which is about submitting applications, specifically with applicant tracking systems. So I think, a lot of people, for those of you who are not out there, applicant tracking systems are the sort of computer system you submit applications to, or your resumes, and they help the recruiters and the hiring managers sort out your resume and try and pick out the top candidates to sort of weed through that flood. So Andrea basically says, how do you find out who to reach out to in an organization where you don't have a contact? Submitted applications seem either get no response or an auto reply with no contact info. So is this, how do you know who to address maybe your cover letter to, or send up a follow-up email? So, obviously you suggested Googling, but how do you find the person that you need to actually Google?
Good question. So I know I keep coming back to LinkedIn. I swear they didn't pay me before this session to advocate for them, but I am a true believer in the power of LinkedIn when it's used right. So I would just try to find someone at the company that you have a mutual connection with or something in common with. Maybe you went to the same high school. Maybe you're both from Cincinnati. Maybe you went to the same university, and ask them, say, I see that you also know Jennifer. We used to work together at my prior company. What a small world. I actually just applied to your organization, and I'm wondering if you by chance know who the person is I can follow up with at the company who's making hiring decisions, so I can reach out and see if there's anything they need on my end. That would be a good way to do it. You can also just send an email to someone you find in HR, and they'll direct your email to the right person. You can say, if you're not the right person I should be contacting, please let me know who I should reach out to.
Yes. And I know I've done that a few times in my past, where I've just cold called the company and said, hey, I just need the name of the person to put on the cover letter. I promise I'm not going to reach out to them. So I've done that a few times. And, when it comes to your specialty, which is often working with younger people and young professionals to advance in their career, we have a lot of questions from people who maybe are entering the workforce or early on. So I want to make sure that we get to them. And Harsh asks, how do you include metrics on a resume when you're early in your career with less than 3 years experience?
Yeah, Harsh, I saw your comment. It's such a good question. My advice is to think of everything you've done in your career, whether it's in university, whether it's even in high school, if you're really early on, as something that leads to transferable skills. And then tie it into metrics. So let me give you an example. When I was in high school, I was a bus girl at a pizza restaurant in my hometown. Not glamorous at all. But I learned about customer service. I learned the importance of efficiency. I came up with new ways to organize my time in the restaurant to bus as many tables as possible. And I put that on my resume. So identified ways to increase service levels by 10% through X, Y, and Z, something like that. Come up with metrics of the impact that you've had. And if you don't know the number, that's okay. Just say approximately or on average. Just take a best guess and preface it with, this is an approximation, but I want to give you a sense for the magnitude of the work that I did. So examples of numbers you can use: the number of people you met with, the number of people on your team, the percent increase in sales, or the number of customers you worked with per hour. All of those are great metrics to put on your resume.
Yes, and we had another question come in too about sort of young people with not a lot of experience, and specifically this one's from Maria. What advice do you have for young professionals working on a career transition? And I think this also applies to other people who ask questions about career transitions without a lot of experience, from Pinaki and Byron. So what would your advice to them be about pivoting when you don't have that much experience?
Yeah, I get this question all the time. How do I set myself up for a totally different job than I've done in the past and set myself up in a way that people want me for that role? They see that I'm going to be a superstar in it. So let me walk you through an exercise that I think is really helpful, and I'm going to try and walk you through it as clearly as I can. So what I want you to do is get a sheet of paper and write down in one column all of the different experiences that you've had. So it might be leadership roles, times you've taken initiative, times you drove results, managed a team, whatever it is. Doesn't matter if it has anything to do with the job that you're applying to. Then create another column, and I want you to write down the bullet points in the job descriptions that you're interested in, excited about. Just write down those bullet points of responsibilities, qualifications. So now you have two columns side by side. And now you create your third and final column. And this is going to be where you rewrite column 1 to reflect some of the keywords in column 2. So you look at your two columns that you have written down, and then I want you to try and tie the experiences you've had to the description in the job that you're interested in, and draw lines of, okay, what could kind of relate to that I've done? Okay, I see that I bust a lot of tables and I came up with a new process to make customer service more efficient. Well, they're looking for someone who has an innovative approach to process improvement. Okay, there's a correlation. Now I'm going to go to column 3 and I'm going to rewrite that bullet point in a way that reflects innovation and process efficiency. So optimized process efficiency for a statewide pizza chain that ultimately drove a 10% increase in revenues due to ability to support increased customer demand. So you really want to tie what you've done, translate those skills into the work that you hope to be doing, and make it very clear for a recruiter or a hiring manager how the things that you have done really translate to what you will be doing.
Definitely. And I always use the analogy, and if people are watch the show more than once, they're probably sick of me saying it, but think of yourself as a basket of skills. So what makes up you and what you do at your job? So is it video skills? Is it interpersonal communication? Is it hard skill with specific technology? And instead of saying I'm a salesperson, think about all those little bits and pieces that you could put in another basket and say, okay, well, I want to go into vendor management. And, I could use this skill, and this skill. So I think that's fantastic advice. Yeah. And moving a little bit along the age spectrum, we have some people who maybe took some time off for a career gap. And I saw, I think Katie in the stream talked a little bit about, she has been out of field for a little while. And I know we got a question from Suzanne that also talked about getting back into the workforce or getting into a career after a while. What is your advice for people who have taken some time off of work?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, that I think anyone you talk to will find it commendable that you're putting yourself back out there and taking that initiative to hop back in. My advice is to be able to talk about what you're doing to upskill, to prepare yourself for however the world has changed. So let's say you've taken 10 years, maybe 15 years out of work, raised a family. The world has changed a bit in how we go about interacting with one another. So maybe you've taken some LinkedIn learning courses. Maybe you've gone to a coding academy. Maybe you've read a few books or articles or created your own paper, a research paper. be able to talk about why you are so prepared to dive back in and start contributing, to show, look, I know what I'm getting myself into. I have all this valuable prior experience that is super relevant to what I'm going to be doing. And you do not need to have any concerns about me being out of date, out of touch at all if you were out for a significant amount of time, because you've already overcome that challenge and you're ready to hit the ground running.
I think, yeah, definitely. And also, if you have skills and they're good skills and they are sharp skills, just because you've been away for 2 years doesn't mean that they're any less valuable because you took 2 years off. So that's also, I think, always important to keep in mind when you go in and you're talking about salary. So I think that's great advice. And we got a lot of people asking about ageism. So we have Jerry, Karen, and Laura talking about, the struggles people, especially once they reach, for 40, 45, 50 and above, what they face when they go into an employer, they're sending out their resume. What tips do you have for people to maybe mitigate the risk of experiencing ageism, which unfortunately is very prevalent?
It is. And it's such a shame because you have such valued experience that adds a ton of value to any organization and any team. So I think just being very confident in the learnings that you've had throughout your career and saying, when I started my career, I was doing this. And I realized over time, that's not the best way to lead a team or to contribute or to go about proposing a new idea. So walk them through why you are so valuable because you have so much experience and the transformation that you've had. And it'll help them see, if I hire a 24-year-old, they're going to still be doing what you used to be doing, but you won't do anymore because you've learned the lessons. And I have to say, my firm specializes in teaching interpersonal skills. And we do a lot of work with young professionals at companies because executives are saying, my recent college grads just don't know these interpersonal skills or don't have these life skills because they don't learn them in college, and we don't have time for them to learn them the hard way. So I urge you to really feel so confident with what you do have to offer, because it's clearly a gap, because companies are bringing in me and my team because the young professionals don't always have the experience that you do that is so vital.
Definitely. And I think, I remember when I was a medical reporter years ago, I remember doing a story about people who were trained on robotic surgery. So these were surgeons who were like people who grew up playing video games in the 90s or 80s. And then what happened was a lot of hospitals realized they needed people with other skills, which were taught in previous classes at medical school. So they actually were bringing older surgeons back to do surgeries that couldn't be done robotically because they realized that they pivoted too much, and that skills that maybe were maybe discouraged for a few years ended up coming back in vogue. So it's important to know your value and also be confident about it, because I think a lot of people, they get in their mindset that this is going to be an issue. And if you're confident going into something, it really helps, I think, combat against a lot of insecurities that can be projected on the other person. So I think that's fantastic advice.
Good. And I think that goes, Andrew, for if you're trying to get a job in an industry completely different than what you had been doing, or if you're early in your career and you feel a little insecure about, I really don't have a ton of work experience. If you are confident, they're going to feel confident about you. And I think anyone can smell desperation. So do what you have to do to pump yourself up and feel really confident going into any of these conversations. I know when I'm about to enter into a high pressure environment or one where I feel really insecure, I rock out to some music, I do some deep breathing, and I get in the zone and tell myself they would be lucky to have me. And that kind of mantra is going to really set you up for a successful conversation.
Definitely. And I think one of the tips that I've heard is the superhero pose where you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm sort of strapped into the chair here, so I can't do it. But, if you look that up, that's something that also gives you a little boost. Yeah. And, before we go, I want to ask, another question that came in from Andrea, who basically says, what is the number one thing you might not be thinking of that you can do in your job search? So in other words, Andrea is asking, what is the one tip I might not have heard of yet?
I love that.
Yeah.
So Gosh, there's so many resources out there. I think it's tapping into your mutual connections. So make sure you have a substantial amount of connections on LinkedIn. 500 is a great target. And connect with people so that you can have a higher likelihood of having connections. There's also incredible resources out there to support you in the job search, because it can be lonely. It can be demoralizing. So if you haven't already heard of placement.com is an unbelievable resource that guides you through the job search process. And they're like your cheerleader throughout the entire process. So check out placement.com or other resources out there that you might not have been aware of, that really could give you that different perspective that's going to just push you over the edge.
That's great. And thank you so much, Elise, for joining us. I hope everyone was following and seeing at the bottom of the screen, we were flashing your LinkedIn profile so they could follow you for great advice and some great content. So thank you so much.
Of course, yes. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. I want to support you in any way I possibly can. And I can't wait to see where all of you end up in your careers.
Thanks so much, Elise. Thanks for joining us. And then for all of you out there, thank you for joining us. Maybe some of you have noticed we tried out a new feature today. You could click Remind Me on a link earlier this week to get a notification about this broadcast. So if you try that out, we want to hear from you. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Tell us in the comments and we'll be paying attention because we always want to make sure that we're doing our best to serve you and helping you discover what we're doing to help you. So be sure to get those in the comments. And I saw so many questions come in. I'm sorry we can't get to all of them, but I think I saw Troy talking about ghosting. I have good news. Get Hired's newsletter on Monday is about ghosting. And then Harsh, you talked about the hidden job market. The week after that, we're going to be talking about that too. So stay tuned. You can follow me to get the Get Hired newsletter. And don't forget to tune in Monday on the LinkedIn news page. So that's where we are right now, because my friend and colleague, Susie Jackson, is going to be talking about what we can do to get students back to school safely. It's obviously a huge, hot, important topic right now because we want to make sure that our kids are safe and that our families are safe too. So be sure to tune in Monday. And as always, I want to invite you back here on Fridays when I will be here at noon Eastern time. My guest coming up on Friday will be Kanika Tolfers, who is the founder and creator of Career Rehab. So be sure to stay tuned for that. And until we meet again, please be safe. You could only be a good candidate and you could only get a job if you are healthy enough to do so. So make sure you're following the recommendations and guidance of local health officials. And until then, I hope you are well. I hope you are safe, and best of luck.